My name is Amelia, and what happened that night still feels like a scar carved into my memory. The dog shook violently in my arms, its wiry fur scratched against my cheek, its heartbeat drumming fast against my chest. I thought I could calm it, but my own pulse was racing just as wildly. 3 men circled me on the roadside like wolves closing in on prey. Their laughter was sharp, cutting through the cold night air. Each step they took pressed me closer against the dark woods behind me. I had nowhere to run. One of them sneered, "Put it down, sweetheart. Dogs don't like liars." His hand reached forward, casual but cruel. My legs froze. My arms tightened around the small body I refused to release. I wanted to scream for help, but the words died in my throat. That was the moment headlights slashed through the night. A black SUV pulled to the side of the road. The men hesitated, their shadows stretching in the glare. The driver stepped out, tall, steady shoulders squared like a soldier returning from war. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Walk away. 2 words. Nothing more. Yet the way he spoke low, even unshaken, stripped the bravado from their faces. The boldest of the 3 muttered something, but they backed off, retreating into the dark like smoke dissolving into wind. Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. My knees wobbled, my arms trembled, and the dog whimpered softly. I was safe for the moment, but safety felt fragile like glass that could shatter if anyone breathed too hard. The man looked at me then. His eyes were calm, too calm, like he had seen nights like this before. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, though my voice was gone. He glanced at the dog, then back at me. "Does it belong to you?" "No, I just found him." My throat burned with the words I could not finish. They were going to... He nodded as if he already knew. He didn't reach for me. He only extended a hand toward the dog. "He's scared." "You are too. Let's get you both out of here." It was not a question. It was not a demand. It was something else, matter of fact, yet strangely gentle. Against my instinct to resist strangers, I stepped forward. My feet felt heavy, but I followed him to the SUV. Inside, the leather smelled faintly of coffee and warmth. The heater hummed, chasing away the chill that had wrapped around me for days, maybe weeks. I slid into the seat, still clutching the dog, unwilling to let go. He adjusted the mirrors, started the engine, and drove with steady hands on the wheel. For a long time, silence filled the car, the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but watchful. Only when the trembling in my hands began to fade did he ask, "What's your name?" "Jenna," I stopped, startled. My own name sounded foreign, like I hadn't spoken it aloud in years. Jenna Myers. "I'm Ethan Cole." He didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes stayed on the road the way a man drives when he has nothing to prove, only somewhere to take you. "Where were you headed?" he asked. The answer tangled in my throat. I had nowhere. Not anymore, just away. He didn't push. He didn't pry. He only nodded once, his gaze still fixed ahead. Then he gestured lightly toward the dog now curled up on my lap, already drifting into sleep, as if the nightmare had passed. "You keeping him?" I almost laughed, the sound cracked and uneven. "I don't even have a place for myself, let alone for him." "Then maybe tonight you both do," he said. The highway lights disappeared as he turned off the main road. Trees gathered around us, their branches whispering secrets to the dark. I glanced sideways, unsure why I trusted this man I had just met. But the fear I had felt minutes earlier was gone, replaced by something stranger, a fragile kind of safety. We pulled up to a gated property. Beyond the iron bars stood a house with sharp glass angles and quiet power like it had been carved out of the wilderness itself. He pressed a remote, the gate slid open, and the SUV rolled through. "You can stay in the guest house," Ethan said. His tone wasn't soft, but it wasn't cold either. It was factual, like kindness so obvious it didn't need to be named. I followed him into warm light and polished wood, clutching the dog to my chest. Just hours ago, I had braced myself to sleep on a bench at a train station. Now I was standing in a stranger's guest house, staring at a bed covered in clean sheets. "Lock the door from inside when I leave," he told me. "Food's in the fridge, towels in the bathroom. Tomorrow we'll talk about what you need." Keys clinked softly on the counter. He paused, eyes steady on mine. "You look like someone who hasn't had a good night's sleep in a long time." My throat tightened, not because he was wrong, but because it felt like he could see straight through me. "Thank you, I mean it." He only nodded, turned and left. The quiet hum of the heater filled the room. I sat on the bed's edge, hands still shaking. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. And when I finally lay back against the pillow, I whispered a thought I barely dared to believe. Maybe tonight I wasn't alone. The first thing I noticed when I woke was the light. It streamed through tall windows in warm golden stripes, as if the morning itself had been waiting just for me. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The sheets were clean, the air smelled faintly of cedar, and the soft rhythm of the dog's breathing curled at the foot of the bed. Then memory rushed back Ethan, the SUV, the men on the road, the guest house. I whispered good morning to the dog. His tail thumped like he had just won the lottery. That tiny burst of joy struck something inside me. I had been so used to waking to dread to the sound of raised voices or the emptiness of bus stations. Now, for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I was waking to quiet. I showered the water warming instantly instead of sputtering cold like the public restrooms I had been using. The towel smelled fresh, not like bleach from a laundromat. In the kitchen, the fridge hummed softly. Inside, food, eggs, fruit, even milk sat waiting as though this place had always been mine. My chest tightened with gratitude so sharp it hurt. A knock came at the door. My pulse jumped, but when I opened it, Ethan stood there. He wore jeans and a gray shirt, his hair still damp. In daylight, he seemed less like a stranger who had appeared from the dark, and more like a man who belonged here, calm, steady, a little guarded. "You sleep?" he asked. I nodded, better than in a long time. "Good. You hungry?" The simple question twisted in me. Accepting food had always felt like accepting a debt, something I would eventually be forced to repay. My hesitation must have shown because he only stepped back and said, "Come to the main house when you're ready. Bring him too." He pointed at the dog, who wagged furiously as if he understood. Breakfast was eggs, bacon, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I sat at the polished kitchen counter, eating slow, watching Ethan move with a quiet efficiency. The house looked like something from a magazine, modern glass and wood, but lived in, warm. When I finished, he slid a folder across the counter. "This is a job description. I need someone to keep this place running. Laundry, cleaning, cooking when you want. Nothing crazy. Pay is fair. You can stay in the guest house rent-free as long as you want." I blinked at him, stunned. "You're offering me a job?" You need one. I need someone I can trust." His voice was steady, like this was just Tuesday for him. "But you don't even know me." He shrugged. "I know you picked up a stray dog and held your ground against 3 men twice your size. That's enough of a character reference for me." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. Instead, I stared at the folder as if it might vanish if I blinked. All the couches I had slept on, all the rejection, all the nights of being told I wasn't enough. Suddenly here was someone offering me not charity, but choice. And choice felt revolutionary. I should have said no. I should have thanked him and walked away before things grew complicated. But when I looked out the wide windows toward the guest house, sunlight spilling like a welcome mat across the grass, I couldn't. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll do it." Something softened in his expression like a cloud parting for the first time in years. "Great. You start today. There's a credit card for groceries and supplies. I'll show you where everything is." By noon I had keys of my own, a closet stocked with cleaning supplies, and a refrigerator that actually belonged to me. The work wasn't glamorous, scrubbing countertops, folding laundry I hadn't worn, but it was mine. For the first time since I left home, I wasn't drifting. That night I sat on the porch with the dog, who I had decided to name Lucky. The sun dropped behind the trees, the air cooled, and the quiet felt different here. Not lonely. Safe. I still didn't know why Ethan had stopped for me that night. I didn't know why he trusted me enough to offer work and shelter. But as I stroked Lucky's fur and watched the last light fade, I realized something dangerous. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe safety could last. And if you're still here with me listening to this story, I want to ask something simple. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. And if stories like this make your heart race like mine, hit subscribe so you never miss what happens next. Because trust me, this was only the beginning. I used to believe that childhood wounds eventually scab over and fade, but the truth is they never really go away. They live under your skin, pulsing quietly, waiting for the wrong word or the wrong look to tear them open again. Lying in the guest house that night, listening to the soft hum of the heater and Lucky's steady breathing, I felt safe. Yet the safety triggered memories I had buried so deep, I thought I would never face them again. I grew up in a cramped apartment above a hardware store. It was just me and my mom after my father vanished when I was 5. No dramatic goodbye, no promises he couldn't keep. Just a note on the counter and an empty bank account. I remember watching my mom sob until her voice broke, then harden into stone. She worked double shifts at the hospital, her eyes always ringed with exhaustion, her tone sharp from stress. But she provided. She always made sure I had the basics. When I turned 17, she met Mark. At first, he seemed perfect, polite, too polite. He washed dishes, brought flowers, even laughed at my mom's tired jokes. I wanted to like him because she deserved someone steady, someone who cared. For a while, I believed he might be that man. But politeness can hide sharp edges. Over time, his words turned into knives. Subtle at first comments about my shoes left by the door, the fridge always empty, how I never did enough. I brushed it off until brushing it off became impossible. I was working weekends at a cafe to save for college-paying bills when Mom's paycheck fell short. At 16, I was balancing numbers most adults avoided while secretly dreaming of sketchbooks and charcoal stains on my fingers. But Mom insisted on accounting, stable, safe, not like her. So I buried my art. I buried me. By 21, I thought maybe life would settle. I had finished community college, lined up interviews, even paid off some of Mom's medical debt without telling her. But Mark never stopped. His criticism filled every corner of our small apartment. Every achievement I brought home became another excuse for him to cut me down. The last fight started over pasta. I had used the wrong pan, apparently. He exploded, and for once I snapped back. That was when he said the one line I can never erase. "You're just like your father, useless, always ready to run when things get hard." I froze. My chest hollowed out like he had carved me open with those words. But the worst part wasn't him. It was her. My mom slammed her hand on the table and told me to apologize to him, as if his words were truth carved in stone. That was the moment something inside me broke. I grabbed my bag, stuffed in a few clothes, my sketchbook, and the little cash I had. Mom followed me to the door, her eyes wide, her mouth half open like she might call me back. But she didn't. She just let me go. It is strange how silence can be louder than screams. That silence pushed me out into the world alone. I took a bus north, clutching an old Christmas card with an address scrawled in the corner, my father's handwriting from years ago. I thought maybe he would let me in, maybe he had changed. Maybe after all this time he would choose me. When I finally arrived exhausted and freezing, a woman opened the door. 2 small boys clung to her legs. She looked at me like she already knew who I was. And then she said the words that shattered me again. "He's not here. He's up north for weeks at a time. He has a new family now. I'm sorry." She let me sleep on their couch that night, but in the morning she asked me not to return. She wasn't cruel. She was final. So I drifted. From town to town, sofa to sofa, always searching for something, a job, a place, a reason. But I only found rejection. Each time I thought I had a foothold, the ground slipped away. That's how I ended up on that dark road, clutching Lucky, surrounded by men who smelled blood in the air. And that's when Ethan appeared. I think about that often, how years of running, of rejection, of breaking all, led to that one moment. A moment when someone finally stood between me and the world, not to control me, not to belittle me, but simply to protect me. Maybe safety had been waiting all along. Maybe I had to be broken enough to recognize it. So, I pressed my palm against the sketchbook beside the bed, its pages curled and worn from travel. It was the one piece of me I never surrendered, the only proof that the girl who loved to draw still lived somewhere inside. For the first time since I left home, I wondered if she might come back. The bus ride north had felt endless, every mile pulling me farther from the life I knew and deeper into uncertainty. I kept my fingers clenched around that faded Christmas card, the one with my father's handwriting, the one I convinced myself was proof he might still care. The ink was smudged from years in my bag, but the address was still clear. It became my compass, the fragile hope I carried through sleepless nights on benches and sticky bus seats. When I finally reached the town, snow was falling in small flurries that clung to my jacket. I walked block after block, the weight of my bag pulling on my shoulder until I stood in front of the small house from the card. My chest thudded. I told myself that no matter what I found, it had to be better than what I had left behind. A woman opened the door. Her hair was messy. Two small boys clung to her legs, their eyes wide and curious. She looked at me with recognition I hadn't earned, and then she spoke the words I wasn't prepared to hear. "He's not here. He works seasonal jobs up north. He has a family now." Her voice wasn't cruel. It was soft, almost apologetic, but each word landed like a stone. A family now. Two words that meant he had moved on. He had replaced me. I wanted to argue to say I was his daughter, that I had come so far just for him. Instead, I stood frozen, the snow melting into my hair, my breath catching in the cold. She must have seen the devastation on my face because she stepped aside and let me in. That night I slept on their couch. The warmth of the house only sharpened the ache in me. I listened to the boys' laughter drifting from their bedroom, a sound I had once longed to hear from my own father. The woman gave me a blanket, a pillow, and a smile full of pity. But in the morning she asked me not to return, not unkindly, just firmly. I walked away carrying nothing but the truth I had tried to avoid. I didn't belong there. From then on, I drifted. A couch in one town, a diner floor in another. I picked up odd jobs when I could, washing dishes, sweeping floors, refilling coffee cups. Sometimes I earned enough for a bus ticket to another town, sometimes just enough for a sandwich. Nights blurred into mornings, mornings into nights. My sketchbook grew heavier with each page I filled, as if my drawings were the only anchor keeping me from disappearing completely. But loneliness is a weight that grinds you down. Every door closed, every rejection piled higher until I stopped expecting kindness at all. I learned to keep my head down, to make myself small, to accept that people only helped when they wanted something back. Mark's voice haunted me. People like you never last, and the worst part was, I started to believe him. It was on one of those nights trudging down a cold stretch of road that fate twisted. The streetlights were broken, the air sharp with winter. I had found Lucky thin and shivering near a trash bin. His ribs showed through his fur, but his eyes pleaded with me. I couldn't leave him. I picked him up, tucking him against me, even though I had nowhere to take him. That's when the men appeared, drunk, restless, searching for something to torment. They circled me like they owned the night, mocking the sight of a stray girl hugging a stray dog. I remember thinking this was how it ended for me, on a forgotten road swallowed by shadows. But then headlights cut across the dark, a black SUV stopped, and Ethan Cole stepped into my life. The memory replayed in my head over and over, each time more unreal. How a stranger's calm voice had scattered three men who thought themselves wolves. How he had looked at me without judgment, only steadiness. How he had opened a door that night, not just to a house, but to a possibility I thought I had lost forever. Lying in his guest house afterward, I realized something terrifying. For years I had been running toward places that didn't want me, chasing people who wouldn't choose me. But for the first time, someone had chosen to stand beside me without asking for anything in return. And that was more frightening than the loneliness I had grown used to. Because safety meant hope. And hope meant I had something to lose. Lucky stirred beside me, his small body curled tight, his breathing steady. I reached out and stroked his fur, whispering his new name like a promise. Lucky. Maybe both of us were. The first morning in Ethan's guest house felt unreal, like I had woken into someone else's dream. The fridge was stocked. The shower worked, and for once I wasn't bracing myself for shouting or slammed doors. Lucky padded across the wooden floor, wagging his tail, like he had already claimed this place as home. Ethan kept his word. He gave me space, but by noon he returned with a folder and a calm explanation. I need someone to keep the property running, laundry cleaning meals when you feel like it. Nothing complicated. You can stay in the guest house rent-free. Pay is steady. What do you think? I stared at him as if he had spoken another language. A job, a roof, a choice, all at once. I had learned to expect charity with strings attached help that came with invisible hooks, ready to tear me apart later. But his offer didn't sound like pity, it sounded like trust. "You don't even know me," I whispered. He shrugged his eyes steady. "I know you carried a stray dog through the dark and refused to let go. That tells me enough." Something in me cracked at those words. For years I had been measured by what I failed to do wrong, wrong shoes, wrong daughter. But this man saw one moment of courage and called it enough. I accepted. My voice was barely audible, but he heard it. Okay. By the afternoon, I had keys in my pocket and work in my hands. The guest house hummed with quiet purpose as I scrubbed countertops, folded fresh laundry-stocked shelves with groceries he insisted I buy, using a card he had given me. It wasn't glamorous, but every dish I cleaned, every towel I stacked, anchored me a little more. For the first time since leaving home, I wasn't drifting. That night, Lucky curled at my feet on the porch, while the sun dipped behind the trees. The quiet here felt different. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't the silence of rejection or the hollow sound of a slammed door. It was peace. Still doubt crept in. People help because they want something, that's what Mark had always told me. Was Ethan different, or was I just too desperate to believe it? I stroked Lucky's fur, his tail thumping in response. Maybe I wasn't the only one who needed to learn trust. I looked down at my sketchbook, the one object that had followed me from couch to couch, bus to bus. My fingers itched for a pencil. For years I had buried the part of me that loved to draw. Maybe now was the time to let her breathe again. So I opened it. The pages curled at the edges, the cover worn, but it still smelled faintly of graphite and old dreams. I sketched Lucky first, his small frame nestled against my legs. Then the tall pines outside the window, the slant of sunlight across the floor, even the guest house itself. My hand moved almost without thought, as if muscle memory had been waiting for this moment. Hours slipped by. When I finally looked up, night had settled over the property, and I realized I had missed dinner completely. But for the first time in years, my chest felt light. The next morning, Ethan found me on the porch. In his hand was one of my sketches. My stomach dropped. "This yours?" he asked, holding the paper to the light. Heat rushed to my face. "Yes, sorry, I didn't mean—" "Don't apologize," he interrupted gently. He studied the lines for a long moment, then looked at me. "You're good, really good." I shrugged, uncomfortable. "It's just a hobby. I was supposed to be an accountant, safe, stable." He tilted his head, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his mouth. "You sound like someone repeating what they were told to want." I had no answer because he was right. That night he returned from town with something under his arm, a new set of sketch pencils and a crisp pad of paper. He set them on the counter without ceremony. "I can't accept this," I said quickly. "You're working, you're earning. Call it an advance on your paycheck." My throat tightened with gratitude, so sharp it almost hurt. I touched the clean white pages as if they were a doorway. Maybe they were. And here's where I want to pause because I need to ask you something. If you had been in my place, carrying nothing but an old sketchbook and a stray dog, would you have trusted a stranger's offer? Would you have stayed? Share your thoughts in the comments because your perspective might help someone else who feels lost. Then take a deep breath, because this story was about to shift into something I never expected. The days that followed settled into a rhythm I had never known before. Morning sunlight filtered through the guest house windows, soft and golden. Lucky would nudge my hand until I rolled out of bed, tail wagging like a metronome. I brewed coffee in the small kitchenette, savoring the bitter warmth as though it were the first real cup of my life. Work filled my hours, but it wasn't the kind that ground me down. I swept the sleek wooden floors of the main house, folded fresh laundry that smelled faintly of pine, and cooked meals in a kitchen that looked straight out of a magazine. Every task felt grounding. For once, my hands weren't trembling from fear, but from effort. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building something. The silence here was different. Back in my mother's apartment, silence meant tension. The heavy pause before Mark's voice cut me down. Here, silence was peace. The hum of the washing machine became background music. The clink of dishes echoed like reassurance. For the first time, I realized how much I craved ordinary days. Ethan kept his distance, which surprised me. I had expected him to hover to pry to remind me that all this was conditional. But he didn't. He checked in briefly, his questions, simple. Did you eat How's Lucky before disappearing into his own work? His restraint made me uneasy at first, as if the catch was waiting just around the corner. Yet the more days passed, the more I realized there wasn't one. One afternoon while cleaning the living room, I stood by the glass wall overlooking the forest. The trees stretched tall and endless, their branches swaying gently, as if whispering secrets to the wind. I paused with the cloth in my hand, breath-catching. It looked like a painting I might have drawn once upon a time, back when dreams still felt possible. That night I opened the sketchbook again. My fingers shook as I sharpened a pencil, the smell of graphite sharp and familiar. Lucky became my first subject. His small body curled at the foot of the bed, his ears twitching even in sleep. I traced the outline of his frame, the curve of his nose, the trust in his posture. My hand remembered even when my mind resisted. Hours slipped by unnoticed. By the time I looked up, night had swallowed the property, and I realized I had missed dinner again. But I didn't feel empty. I felt alive. When Ethan discovered one of my sketches on the porch the next morning, I expected criticism, maybe dismissal. Instead, he studied the drawing with a calm intensity. "You're good," he said simply, "really good." Heat rushed to my cheeks. I tried to brush it off. "It's nothing, just a hobby." He looked at me, eyes steady, voice quiet but firm. "It doesn't look like nothing." That evening he returned with a package sketch pencils, brand new, and a pad of untouched paper. He set them on the counter without fanfare. "I can't accept this," I told him, shaking my head. "You're working," he replied. "You're earning. Call it an advance." Gratitude swelled in my throat until it almost choked me. No one had ever invested in me like this. Not for survival, not for obligation, simply because he believed I was worth it. I spent the following days filling those pages. The forest mist at dawn, the glass walls of the main house catching sunlight. Lucky sprawled across the porch as though he owned it. And once, just once, I sketched Ethan himself standing at the counter pouring coffee, his silhouette outlined against the morning glow. I kept that drawing hidden, afraid of what it might reveal even to me. As the days turned into weeks, something inside me shifted. I no longer mapped escape routes in my head. I no longer counted every dollar tucked in my bag. I wasn't rehearsing excuses to leave. For the first time in years, I wasn't running. What? But the heart has its own way of reminding you that peace can be temporary. And just when I began to believe I could stay, the sound of tires crunching on gravel warned me my fragile haven was about to be tested. The sound of tires on gravel shattered the calm like a stone thrown through glass. I was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough, when the sleek, silver car pulled into the drive. The kind of car you don't expect in the woods, the kind that glitters with money and status. My hand stilled flour dusting the counter as a tall woman stepped out. She looked like she had walked straight out of a magazine spread. Hair glossy and perfect heels clicking against the stone walkway, lips curved into the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Everything about her screamed that she didn't belong here. And yet she moved with the certainty of someone who thought she did. Ethan was already on the porch when she approached. His posture changed, still steady, but stiffer, like a man bracing against a storm. I couldn't hear her words at first, but her tone carried smooth and sharp. "Don't pretend you don't know why I'm here," she said. "You're wasting your time with her." Her, she meant me. My chest tightened. I edged closer just enough to hear his reply. His voice was steady, colder than I had ever heard. "Jenna's none of your business, Alina." So that was her name. "She's living on your property playing house while you—" Alina stopped mid-sentence, probably catching the change in his eyes. "I'm just saying you have a reputation. People will talk." A silence followed so long it made my skin prickle. Then Ethan's answer came cutting through the air like steel. "Let them. You don't get to tell me who I help." Elena scoffed, her heels striking sharp against the stone as she turned away. I stumbled back before they could see me, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the bowl. Her words clung to me like burrs. Help. That was all this was. I had a roof, a job, safety, but maybe I was nothing more than a charity case to him. That night, dinner felt heavy. I pushed food around my plate, unable to swallow the knot in my throat. Ethan lingered in the doorway longer than usual, his gaze narrowing slightly, as if he wanted to ask but held back. The silence between us was thick, and for the first time since I arrived, it didn't feel safe. Later, I packed a small bag, just in case. I had learned not to stay anywhere too long, not to let roots take hold where they weren't welcome. Lucky whined softly as I zipped the bag halfway. I rested my hand on his head, whispering, "Maybe it's time." A knock startled me. Ethan stood at the door, one hand braced on the frame, expression unreadable. "Elena's gone," he said simply. I nodded, avoiding his eyes. She made some good points. Maybe I shouldn't. She doesn't speak for me. His tone cut through my protest. "You're not going anywhere unless you want to." I swallowed hard, my voice small. "Why would you defend me? You barely know me." His gaze softened just slightly. "Because I know enough. You work hard. You don't take handouts. And you've brought life back into this place. Don't let one bitter voice chase you out." Relief crashed through me so suddenly my knees almost buckled. Lucky curled against my feet as if agreeing we weren't leaving tonight. 2 days passed, but the encounter with Elena lingered like smoke after fire. Ethan wasn't avoiding me, but there was a heaviness in his eyes, as if he carried a weight I couldn't name. He still left early, still came home late, but now he lingered more, asking about my day, about what I had drawn, about whether Lucky had chewed another pair of boots. One evening, just as I was drying dishes, he leaned against the doorframe. His tone wasn't casual. "Can we talk?" I set the plate down carefully. "Sure, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's about my parents. They're coming this weekend. It's complicated." I tilted my head. Complicated how? He hesitated, then explained about his father's health, his mother's constant worry, their desire to see him settle down. He rubbed the back of his neck, a rare flicker of discomfort breaking through his calm. "I want to ask you something," he said finally. His shoulders straightened as though preparing for battle. "What is it?" I whispered. "I want you to pretend to be my fiancé, just for the weekend." The dish towel slipped from my hand. "You're what?" "My fiancé," he repeated. "It doesn't have to be dramatic, just enough to ease their minds. Dad won't worry himself sick. They'll go home believing I'm happy building a life." My thoughts spun, me a runaway, his housekeeper pretending to be his fiancé. The request was madness. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear my own doubts. And that's where I'll leave you, because what came next changed everything. If you want to know how a pretend engagement can twist into something neither of us expected, keep watching. Because the truth hiding inside that lie was bigger than either of us could control. I stared at him, waiting for a smile, a laugh, anything that would tell me this was a joke. But Ethan's face stayed serious, his jaw tight, his eyes steady. "You want me, your housekeeper, to suddenly become your fiancé?" I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "You're more than a housekeeper, Jenna," he said quietly. "I'm asking because I trust you. You make this place feel alive again." My cheeks burned. I turned away, fumbling with the towel on the counter. "Ethan, this is crazy. What if they see through it? What if I mess up?" "You won't. You're honest. You care about people. That's all they need to see." The silence stretched until I thought I might drown in it. Every instinct screamed at me to say no. I had spent most of my life trying not to stand out, and here he was asking me to step into the spotlight. But then I saw it, the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, like he hated asking, but needed to anyway. And maybe I wanted to help him the way he had helped me. I exhaled slowly. "Fine, I'll do it. But if this backfires, I'm blaming you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Deal." That night he told me about his childhood. How his dad taught him to fish at the Columbia River. How his mom knitted scarves for every winter. How guilt weighed on him for not visiting more often since his company grew. Listening to him, I realized this wasn't just about appearances. It was about giving his parents peace. The next morning, he handed me a small jewelry box. Inside lay a simple silver band. My fingers trembled as I slid it onto my left hand. It was supposed to be pretend, yet when I looked in the mirror, it didn't feel like it. The day of their arrival, I stood by the window smoothing the front of the soft blue dress Ethan had chosen for me. Lucky sat at my feet, tilting his head as if asking, "You sure about this?" "No," I whispered, smiling at him anyway. Ethan walked in freshly shaven, wearing a button-down I'd never seen him wear before. His eyes paused on me just long enough to send heat rushing to my cheeks. "You look perfect," he said, clearing his throat quickly after. Then the sound of tires crunched on the driveway. A silver sedan appeared carrying his parents. His mother stepped out first, kind eyes framed by a scarf around her neck. His father followed, silver-haired, his movements careful and slow. "Ready?" Ethan asked. I nodded, gripping the ring on my finger like it might anchor me. We walked outside together. His hand slipped into mine, warm and steady. "Mom, Dad, this is Jenna, my fiancée." His mother's eyes widened, then softened into joy so quickly it made my chest ache. She pulled me into a hug before I could react. "Welcome to the family, dear." I was starting to think I'd never meet the one who tamed him. I laughed nervously, but Ethan squeezed my hand once, silently telling me I was doing fine. His father shook my hand firmly, his eyes sharp yet kind. "He's lucky, you know. Don't let him forget it." The weekend unfolded like a dance I hadn't rehearsed, yet somehow I knew the steps. We cooked together, shared stories by the fire pit, even took a slow walk along the property line while his parents reminisced about raising Ethan near the ocean. I leaned into Ethan's arm when his mother asked how we met. I laughed at stories of him falling out of trees as a boy. It should have felt staged, but it didn't. The way he looked at me, steady, warm, made it feel alarmingly real. On the second night after his parents went to bed, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars. Ethan joined me, handing over a cup of tea. "You were amazing today," he said softly. "They haven't smiled like that in a long time." "It's not hard to like them," I admitted. "They're good people." He was quiet for a while, then said, "You remind me of what home used to feel like." The words settled in my chest, heavy and light at the same time. I looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, I forgot this was supposed to be pretend. His hand rested close to mine on the railing, so close I could feel the heat. I pulled back before it went too far. This was temporary. It had to be. Still as I wrapped the scarf his mother had gifted me around my shoulders, I couldn't ignore the truth forming in the quiet corners of my heart. Pretend or not, I was falling. When Ethan's parents finally drove away Sunday afternoon, I stood on the porch, waving, until the silver sedan disappeared behind the trees. The scarf his mother had given me was wrapped around my shoulders, warm and soft. I clutched it like a lifeline. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The house behind me felt too quiet, too empty without their warmth. "You okay?" Ethan asked. I nodded, though the lump in my throat made it hard to speak. "They're wonderful. They loved you," he said simply. His gaze lingered, unreadable. And for the briefest moment, I wished it wasn't pretend. But when I stepped back into the guest house, the silence pressed down like a weight. Every smile, every touch, every fiancé spoken in front of them, it had all been an act. My chest ached as if I had lost something real. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the way his mother hugged me, the way his father called him lucky, the way Ethan's fingers brushed mine when we reached for the same mug. I was falling for him, hard. But people like me didn't get to fall for people like him. He was steady, established, the kind of man who had options. I was a runaway girl with no family to introduce, no plan for the future, no safety net if things collapsed. I was just convenient. By morning, I had made a decision. When Ethan came into the kitchen for coffee, I was already at the counter with a packed bag and Lucky's leash in my hand. His brow furrowed instantly. "Going somewhere?" I forced a smile. "I think it's time. You've done so much for me, Ethan, more than anyone has in a long time. But I can't keep staying here. I don't belong." He stared at me, stunned. "You don't belong, Jenna. Where is this coming from?" I gripped the leash tighter, my voice breaking. "You don't need me. You just wanted a fake fiancé for a weekend. And I let myself believe it was more. That's my mistake, not yours." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Is that really what you think? That you were just a prop?" "What else would it be?" I whispered. He stepped closer, eyes locked on mine. "Do you have any idea what you've done since you walked into my life? This house used to be silent. I came home every night to empty rooms and the noise of nothing but the fridge running. And then you showed up with a stray dog and a sketchbook, and suddenly it felt like home again." I blinked, startled. His words cracked something open inside me I hadn't realized was still locked. When I asked you to pretend it wasn't because I needed a lie, he continued, his voice softening. It was because I wanted my parents to see what I've started to feel even if I couldn't say it yet. You weren't a stand-in. You were you. Tears blurred my vision before I could stop them. Why would you care about someone like me? He lifted his hand, brushing his thumb gently across my cheek to catch the tear. Because you're stronger than you think. You walked away from a life that crushed you, and you're still standing. You make art out of pain. You care about every living thing you touch, even strays like me. The words made me laugh through the tears. He smiled, then soft and crooked like it had been years since he'd let himself. Please don't go, he whispered. Not because I need help in this house. Not because of some fake story. Stay because I don't want this us to end. The word us landed in my chest like sunlight breaking through clouds. I dropped Lucky's leash and stepped closer, the scarf still clutched in my hand. Okay, I whispered. I'll stay. Lucky barked once, almost like sealing the promise, and Ethan laughed a real unguarded laugh that made the entire house feel lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away. I was choosing to stay. And now I want to ask you, if you were in my place, would you have trusted his words? Would you have stayed, or would fear have driven you back out the door? Tell me in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one who has wrestled with that choice. The days that followed my decision to stay felt like stepping into a life I had never dared to imagine. The guest house wasn't just a roof anymore. It was a home slowly forming around me, one ordinary day at a time. Lucky stretched across the rug by the window, his tail thumping whenever I moved. My clothes hung neatly in the closet instead of crumpled in a bag. The refrigerator hummed with food I had chosen myself. Even my sketchbooks began to multiply. What once was a single, battered notebook, now stacked into a small collection filled with drawings of trees, dogs, and stolen moments of quiet. Ethan's presence changed too. He was no longer just the stranger who had pulled me from the dark road. He became part of my daily rhythm, a constant hum in the background that steadied everything. He still worked long hours, but now he lingered when he came home. He asked about my sketches, my day, the new bread recipe I was trying. He didn't hover, didn't demand, but he noticed. Always. One evening as I cleaned the kitchen, he leaned against the counter watching me with that quiet gaze of his. This house feels different, he said. Different, how I asked, brushing flour from my hands. Alive, he answered simply. His words lingered long after he left the room, echoing in a part of me I had thought was broken. The quiet here wasn't empty anymore. It wasn't the silence of rejection or the hollow sound of slamming doors. It was the silence of safety, of trust. Sometimes I would sit on the porch with Lucky, watching the sun slip behind the trees, and I realized I no longer mapped escape routes in my head. I no longer counted every dollar in my bag, rehearsing excuses to leave. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. Still old habits die hard. At night, when the forest grew too quiet, doubts crept back. Why me? Why trust me? Why open his home to a runaway with nothing to offer? Mark's voice sometimes echoed in my memory, "You'll never be enough." And though I tried to drown it with pencil strokes, some nights, it clawed its way back. But then Ethan would appear in small ways that silenced the doubts. A new set of pencils left on the counter, a question about a sketch he had glimpsed, a rare laugh that slipped through his usual calm. It wasn't grand gestures, it was steadiness. The kind of steadiness I had never known. 3 months passed, and the transformation was undeniable. The guest house no longer looked temporary. My clothes lined the closet, my art lined the shelves, and Lucky had his own bed by the window. Even Ethan's parents began visiting more often. His mother hugged me like I had always been hers, pressing jars of peach jam into my hands. His father teased Ethan, pride glimmering in his voice. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. Yet deep down, I knew something was shifting. Each laugh, each touch, each shared glance was a thread weaving us closer. And I was terrified of how much I wanted it. Terrified of the fact that I no longer wanted to leave. One crisp Saturday morning, Ethan told me to dress nicely. Something comfortable, he added, with a small grin, refusing to explain further. Curiosity gnawed at me, but I followed him anyway. We drove into town, the air carrying the scent of autumn leaves. He led me to a small building, and when I stepped inside, my breath caught. The walls were lined with my sketches, Lucky on the porch, the guest house in the mist. Ethan himself pouring coffee by the window. It was an art gallery. I turned to him, my heart pounding. "Ethan, what is this?" "You deserve to be seen," he said simply, his hand resting warm and steady on my shoulder. "You gave this place life again. Let people see what you see." My throat tightened, tears stinging my eyes. All the years I had buried my art believing it was worthless, and here it was, framed, displayed, admired. People wandered the room, pointing, smiling, whispering about the piece in each sketch. One woman bought the drawing of the guest house. As she handed me the check, she whispered, "It feels like home." Home. The word no longer felt dangerous. It felt true. I traced the frame of another piece, my chest full. "I think I'm finally done running," I whispered. And for the first time I believed it. Life after the gallery felt like walking into sunlight after years of storm. My sketches weren't just mine anymore. They were out in the world, framed on walls, admired by strangers, even purchased by one woman who told me she felt at home, just looking at them. Those words clung to me like a gift I hadn't expected home. A word I once feared, now slowly becoming real. The guest house no longer carried the echo of temporary. It was filled with pieces of me, stacks of sketchbooks, jars of pencils worn down from hours of use, Lucky's toys scattered across the rug. The scent of fresh bread or soup often drifted through the windows, and every evening I sat on the porch sketching the fading light as the forest swallowed the horizon. Ethan was part of that rhythm. He wasn't just the man who had saved me from the roadside anymore. He became someone I leaned on in ways that scared me. He checked in each evening, asked what I had drawn, sometimes just sat beside me in quiet. No demands, no expectations, only presence. One evening after another visit from his parents, I found myself laughing more freely than I had in years. His father teased him about being finally grown up, while his mother handed me another scarf she had knitted, pressing it into my arms as if I had always been her daughter. When they left, I clutched that scarf to my chest and realized my heart was trembling. Not from fear, but from belonging. Yet belonging was dangerous. It meant I had something to lose. That night I caught my reflection in the glass window. My hand brushed the silver ring still on my finger, the one Ethan had given me for the weekend with his parents. It had been meant as a prop, but I hadn't taken it off. Every time I tried, I froze. Part of me feared that removing it would undo everything, that the fragile life we had built would vanish. I didn't know how to tell him. I didn't know how to admit that somewhere between scrubbing countertops and filling sketchbooks I had fallen for him. Ethan noticed, of course. He always did. One evening he leaned against the porch railing watching me sketch Lucky. The air was cool crickets humming softly in the background. "You're different lately," he said. I glanced up startled. "Different how?" "Lighter," he answered simply. His eyes softened, and in that moment the calm mask he always wore cracked just enough to let me see the man underneath. A man carrying his own storms, his own regrets, yet choosing to stay steady for me. My heart pounded. I wanted to tell him then, to confess that I wasn't pretending anymore. But fear held me back. What if I ruined everything? What if he only saw me as someone he had rescued, someone temporary? So instead I laughed softly, covering my nerves. "Maybe it's Lucky. He makes everything lighter." He smiled crookedly, not pushing further. But the way his gaze lingered told me he knew more than I admitted. Weeks passed, and my feelings deepened. I caught myself sketching him more often, his silhouette in the kitchen, the way his hands rested on the steering wheel, the tilt of his head when he listened. I hid those drawings, embarrassed by the intimacy in each line. Yet each one felt like a confession I couldn't voice aloud. One night while putting away dishes, I overheard him on the phone. His tone was low, serious. He spoke about his father's health, about needing to be present more often. The guilt in his voice was raw, heavy. I wanted to walk in to tell him he wasn't alone, but I stayed in the doorway, listening to a man who carried burdens in silence. And that was when I understood. Ethan wasn't just my rescuer. He was human, flawed, lonely in his own way. The steadiness I admired wasn't because he had no storms, but because he refused to let them spill onto anyone else. I lay awake that night, Lucky curled at my feet, my heart restless. I had promised myself never to rely on anyone, again, never to trust too deeply. But here I was, already tethered to him in ways I couldn't undo. I touched the scarf his mother had given me, the ring still on my finger, and whispered into the darkness, "I don't want to run anymore." But even as I said it, a part of me wondered, was he ready to hear the same truth? Oh, because soon I would find out. The weeks after that phone call carried a strange weight. Ethan didn't talk about it, but I could feel it in the air around him. He moved with the same steady calm, yet there was something in his eyes, something heavier, as though each glance carried a question he wasn't ready to ask. I tried to keep busy. The guest house shined, the pantry stayed stocked. My sketchbooks filled with more drawings than ever before. But the silence between us had shifted. It wasn't the easy quiet of trust anymore. It was the pause before something breaks. One evening as I was drying dishes, Ethan leaned against the doorframe. His posture was casual, but his voice wasn't. "Can we talk?" he asked. My stomach tightened. I set the plate down carefully. "Sure, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he said, though his eyes told me otherwise. "It's about my parents. They're visiting again soon, and it's complicated." I tilted my head, unsure. Complicated how? He exhaled slowly, like the words weighed more than he wanted to admit. "They're worried about me, about my father's health, about me being alone too much. They want to believe I've built a life here, something stable, something lasting." I frowned, unsure where he was leading. "What do you need from me?" He straightened, shoulders squared, as if bracing for battle. "I want you to keep pretending, not just for a weekend, until they believe I'm settled." The air seemed to vanish. My chest tightened, my pulse racing. Pretending once had been nerve-wracking enough. But this extending the lie was something else. I opened my mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't desperation. It was vulnerability, raw and unguarded. He wasn't a man used to asking for help, and the fact that he was asking me now told me more than his words ever could. Part of me wanted to scream that I couldn't do it, that I wasn't cut out for this charade. But another part, the part that remembered the way his parents had hugged me, the way they had smiled, as if I had given them back a piece of their son, knew I would say yes. I swallowed hard. "Ethan, what happens when they realize it's not real? What happens when they see the truth?" He held my gaze steady and calm. "By then, maybe it won't feel like a lie anymore." The room tilted, my throat went dry. I didn't know if he meant for his parents or for us. That night I lay awake in the guest house, staring at the ceiling, while Lucky snored softly at my feet. My mind replayed every moment, the silver ring on my hand, his mother's embrace, his father's words. And then Ethan's confession, soft but undeniable. "You remind me of what home used to feel like." What terrified me most wasn't the lie. It was how much of it already felt like truth. I pressed the scarf his mother had made against my chest, my fingers trembling. I had promised myself I wouldn't need anyone again, that I wouldn't let anyone close enough to hurt me. Yet here I was, wrapped in a family's love that wasn't mine, clinging to a man's steadiness that might never truly belong to me. And still, I didn't want to let go. If you're still with me listening to this story, I'll warn you now, what came next was the moment everything shifted. The safety I had clung to, the fragile trust I was beginning to believe in it, was about to be tested in ways I never saw coming. So keep watching, because the twist that followed turned my life upside down, and it all began with a single knock on the door. The knock came early, just as dawn spilled through the trees. My heart jumped before I even moved. Lucky barked once sharp, then trotted to the door. I pulled it open to find Ethan standing there, his shirt half-buttoned, hair damp as if he hadn't slept. "We need to talk," he said. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. I stepped aside and let him in. The guest house suddenly felt too small, the air heavy with unspoken words. "I can't keep this up," I blurted before he could start. "I can't pretend to be someone I'm not. I can't keep lying to your parents, to you, to myself." His jaw tightened. "You're not lying." "Yes, I am," I shot back. "Every smile, every word, every time I hold your hand in front of them, it's all pretend. And the worst part is, I let myself believe it was real." That's my mistake, not yours. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. You think you're just a prop, Jenna? Is that what you believe? What else could I be? My voice cracked. You don't need me. You needed someone to play a part, and I was convenient. For a moment, silence pressed between us. Then he spoke, his voice low, steady, but rough around the edges. Do you have any idea what you've done since you walked into my life? This house used to be silent. I came home every night to empty rooms, to nothing but the hum of the fridge. And then you showed up with a stray dog and a sketchbook, and suddenly it felt like home again. I froze. My throat tightened. When I asked you to pretend it wasn't because I needed a lie, he continued. It was because I wanted my parents to see what I've started to feel, even if I couldn't say it out loud yet. You weren't a stand-in, Jenna. You were you. Tears burned hot behind my eyes. I shook my head, whispering, "Why would you care about someone like me?" He lifted his hand and brushed his thumb gently against my cheek, catching a tear before it fell. Because you're stronger than you think. You walked away from a life that tried to crush you, and you're still standing. You make art out of pain. You care about every living thing. You touch even strays, like me. A laugh broke through my tears, small and fragile, but real. His smile, soft and crooked, looked like something he hadn't allowed himself in years. Please don't go, he said quietly. Not because I need help here. Not because of some fake story. Stay because I don't want this us to end. The word us hit me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I felt my chest crack open, all the fear and doubt spilling out, leaving behind only one truth. I didn't want to run anymore. Lucky pressed against my legs, his warm weight grounding me. I dropped the leash still in my hand and stepped closer. The scarf his mother had given me brushed against my cheek as I whispered, "Okay, I'll stay." Ethan let out a laugh, deep and unguarded, a sound that filled the room like music. Then he pulled me into his arms, slow, certain, as though he feared breaking the moment. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away from something. I was running toward someone. That night, the guest house didn't feel like a borrowed space. It felt like mine. Ours. I placed my sketchbook on the nightstand, slipped the silver ring back onto my finger, and let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't pretending anymore. But I didn't know then how much harder it would be to hold on to that belief. But for the first time, I wanted to try. 3 months passed, and the guest house no longer looked like a place for visitors. It had transformed into something alive with my fingerprints, my sketches, and my laughter. My clothes hung neatly in the closet, no longer crumpled into a bag I kept half-zipped for escape. Lucky had his own bed by the window, though he still preferred curling against my feet most nights. And on the shelves, sketchbooks multiplied until I had to buy a small stand to hold them all. Each morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows, golden and patient. I brewed coffee while Lucky thumped his tail on the floor, and by the time I sat down to draw, the house was already awake with its own rhythm. The sound of the washer in the main house, the scent of pine, drifting through the open door. Ethan's voice, carrying from a phone call, all of it felt like music now. Ordinary music, the kind I had always wanted but never dared to hope for. Ethan's parents began visiting more often. His mother hugged me as if she had always known me, pressing homemade jam into my hands, or sliding another scarf into my arms with a wink. His father teased Ethan relentlessly, but his pride shone through every word. When they looked at me, it wasn't like they saw a role I was playing. It was like they saw me as part of their family. The silver ring, once a prop, never left my hand. I touched it absent-mindedly while I drew or while I cooked or when I leaned against the porch railing staring out at the woods. It was supposed to be pretend, but every day it felt less like fiction and more like the truth of where my heart had landed. One evening, Ethan and I sat on the porch together, Lucky sprawled at our feet. The air smelled of cedar and distant rain. I sketched the horizon while he sipped his coffee, his presence steady beside me. "You've changed this place," he said suddenly. I looked up. "What do you mean?" He gestured toward the house, toward the garden I had started near the porch, toward Lucky chasing shadows in the grass. "It used to feel empty, cold. Now it feels like—" He trailed off, then smiled faintly. "Home." The word echoed in my chest, both fragile and powerful. Home. Something I had been denied for so long now spoken aloud by the man who had given me the courage to stop running. I swallowed hard my pencil, pausing midline. It feels that way for me, too. He didn't reply, but his hand brushed against mine on the railing, steady and warm. It was enough. The next morning I woke to find one of my sketches framed and hanging on the wall of the main house. It was the drawing of Lucky curled on the porch, the first I had made after pulling out my old sketchbook. I stared at it, my chest tight with emotion. Ethan had said nothing about it. He didn't need to. The gesture spoke louder than words. Days blurred into weeks, and the life I built here grew roots. I planted flowers outside the guest house, their colors bright against the dark wood. I cooked dinners that filled the house with the smell of rosemary and garlic. I drew until my fingers cramped, until the pages spilled with images of everything I never wanted to forget. And somewhere in the middle of all this, I realized the truth. I wasn't pretending anymore. Not with the ring, not with Ethan, not with myself. Still, part of me feared how quickly I had let this life consume me. What if it was too fragile? What if, like every other good thing, it was only temporary? But then I would catch Ethan watching me from across the room, his expression unreadable, but his eyes soft, steady. Or I would hear his mother's voice calling me family. Or I would see Lucky sleeping peacefully at my feet. And I knew I wasn't drifting anymore. I had landed. I thought I had finally found the ending to my story. But the truth, my story was only just beginning. The morning began crisp and bright, the kind of day when the air itself seemed alive. Ethan asked me to dress nicely, something comfortable, he said with that small, secretive grin of his. He refused to give details, only told me to trust him. So I slipped into a simple dress, tugged the scarf his mother had given me around my shoulders, and followed him out to the truck. We drove into town, the road winding through forests, lit gold by the rising sun. My fingers twisted the silver ring absent-mindedly, nerves thrumming even though I didn't know why. Ethan said little, but his hand rested steady on the wheel, and the calm in his posture made me breathe easier. When we stopped, I blinked in surprise. It was a small building, unremarkable from the outside. But when he opened the door and led me inside, my breath caught in my throat. The walls were lined with sketches, my sketches. Lucky curled on the porch, the guest house shrouded in morning mist, the trees bending under snowfall, even one of Ethan leaning at the counter with coffee in his hand, the light catching his profile. I froze, my voice breaking. "Ethan, what is this?" He stood behind me, his presence steady. "An art gallery," he said simply. "Yours." Tears stung my eyes. I turned to him, unable to comprehend. "You? How did you—" "I spoke to the owner weeks ago," he admitted. "Showed her your work. She agreed it deserved to be seen." His hand brushed my shoulder, grounding me. "You gave this place life again, Jenna. Let people see what you see." I turned back to the walls, my chest tightening. Strangers moved slowly through the room, pausing at frames, pointing to their favorites, murmuring words I couldn't quite hear. My heart raced, not from fear this time, but from disbelief. All the years I had buried my art, all the times, I had convinced myself it was worthless. Now it hung here, seen, valued. One woman stopped in front of a sketch of the guest house. She smiled softly, then approached me with a check in hand. "There's so much peace in this piece," she whispered. "It feels like home." Home, that word again. Once it had cut like glass too sharp to hold. Now it wrapped around me like warmth. I clutched the scarf tighter, the tears finally slipping free. Ethan stepped closer, his hand finding mine, his voice quiet but firm. "You deserve this." Later, after the last guest left, I stood in front of one final drawing. It was the piece Ethan had convinced me to finish, even when I doubted myself. The sketch showed all of us together, Ethan, his parents, Lucky at our feet, and me smiling in a way I hadn't known I could. I traced the edge of the frame with trembling fingers. "I think I'm finally done running," I whispered. Ethan slipped an arm around my waist, his lips brushing the top of my head. "Good, because I wasn't planning to let you anyway." I leaned into him, the scent of cedar and coffee wrapping around me, the gallery glowing with fading light. For the first time in my life, I didn't wonder where I belonged. I already knew. I belonged here with Ethan, with Lucky, with a life built from the ashes of everything I had lost. And it was just the beginning. Before I close this chapter, let me leave you with one thought. Have you ever believed your story was over, only to find a new beginning hiding in the wreckage? Share it in the comments, I'd love to hear. And if you want to follow more stories of resilience, hope, and unexpected twists, hit subscribe and check out the next video waiting for you. Because sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after the moments we almost gave up. The gallery lights faded behind us that evening, but the glow inside me remained. Back at the guest house, my house now, I placed the scarf his mother had given me across the chair, set my sketchbook on the table, and listened to Lucky snore softly by the window. The rhythm of it felt like music, steady and reassuring. I thought about the road that had brought me here, the men who circled me that night, the endless bus rides, the slammed doors, and the words that cut deeper than knives. For so long I believed those things defined me, that broken was all I could ever be. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. Sometimes it's a stranger pulling up on a dark road. Sometimes it's a dog you can't leave behind. And sometimes it's discovering that the parts of you tried to bury, like sketches smudged with graphite, were the very pieces meant to save you. Ethan never asked me to be perfect. He never asked me to earn safety. He simply opened a door and let me walk through. In that choice, I learned something I wish I had known sooner. Home isn't just a place. It's the people who choose you even when you don't believe you deserve to be chosen. Now, as I sit here with Lucky's head on my lap and Ethan's voice drifting from the porch, I know one thing with certainty. I'm not running anymore, not from the past, not from fear, not from myself. I'm staying, and that is the bravest thing I've ever done.